There is a specific kind of exhaustion that sleep does not fix. You know this if you have ever experienced it. You go to bed tired and you wake up tired, and the tiredness is not in your body the way ordinary fatigue is. It lives somewhere deeper. It has a quality that rest cannot reach because it is not about rest. It is about something that was given away so completely and for so long that the mechanism that produced it has simply stopped working. Charles Figley called it the cost of caring. He spent decades studying what happens to people whose profession requires them to absorb the suffering of others. Therapists, nurses, emergency workers, caregivers. And what he found was not a personal failure or a character flaw. He found an occupational hazard, a predictable neurological consequence of a nervous system pushed past its capacity for empathic engagement. He defined it as the deep physical, emotional, and spiritual exhaustion that can result from working day to day in an intense caregiving environment. And he noted something that the people experiencing it almost never understand at the time. The very quality that makes someone vulnerable to compassion fatigue, the genuine capacity to feel what another person feels, to be moved by their suffering, to care in a way that costs something, is not a weakness. It is the precondition. You cannot burn out a capacity you never had. Part 1. What it actually is. Compassion fatigue is not burnout, though the two are related. Burnout is the result of chronic work-related stress, the imbalance between what a job demands and what a person has to give it. It produces exhaustion, cynicism, a loss of sense of competence. Compassion fatigue is something more specific and more disorienting. It contains burnout but adds something to it. Secondary traumatic stress. The psychological distress that comes not from doing your own difficult work, but from being exposed to the suffering of others so consistently and so deeply that the exposure itself becomes traumatic. Research from the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences reframed the concept in a way that is worth sitting with. What we call compassion fatigue may not actually be compassion that fatigues. Compassion, the orientation toward another's suffering that motivates helping behavior, activates the brain's reward circuits. It produces dopamine. It feels, at the neurological level, like meaning. What fatigues is empathic distress, the state that occurs when the boundary between your own emotional experience and someone else's collapses. When you stop feeling with the other person and start feeling as them. When their pain becomes your pain so completely that there is no longer a self separate from the suffering being absorbed. Neuroimaging has shown that empathic distress activates the brain areas associated with processing threat and pain, the insular cortices, the anterior medial cingulate cortex, the amygdala. With chronic empathic distress, the dopamine levels within the brain circuits that mediate reward and motivation become depleted. The ongoing depletion leads to burnout. The person who entered the caring profession because helping people felt meaningful finds that the meaning has gone offline. Not because they stopped caring, because the neurological infrastructure that produced the experience of caring has been worn down to nothing. Part 2. What it feels like from the inside. A qualitative study of nurses who had experienced compassion fatigue found something in their accounts that clinical language struggles to capture. The nurses described compassion fatigue not as tiredness, but as being deprived of a gift. They had entered nursing because they had what they experienced as an innate capacity, an empathic gift, something that felt natural and essential to who they were. Compassion fatigue did not just exhaust them, it took that quality away. The caring was no longer experienced in the same way. They found themselves wearing what the study described as a shield of protection against becoming emotionally engaged. Not because they chose to, but because the nervous system erected that shield automatically to protect what remained. They described getting through the working day on whatever energy was left, but their leisure time was devastated. They withdrew from activities. Their social lives deteriorated. They felt guilt about their families. And underneath all of it was a quality of fatigue that was not any ordinary fatigue. Deep and sweeping, impossible to reverse with sleep because it was not the body that was depleted. The nurses felt they were insufficient and not authentic in meeting the suffering patient. That phrase carries the full weight of what compassion fatigue costs. Not just the capacity to help, the sense of being genuine in the helping. the feeling that what you are giving is real rather than performed. Some nurses reported becoming tougher, more cynical, as a way of managing the emotional exposure. They distanced themselves from patients they knew needed emotional support. Their behavior became harder. The warmth that had defined their practice became inaccessible, not because they were different people, but because the mechanism that produced the warmth had been exhausted past recovery by the ordinary demands of doing their job every day. Part 3. Who it happens to. Compassion fatigue does not happen to people who do not care. That is the first and most important thing to understand about it. It happens precisely to the people who care the most, who have the highest demands on themselves, who are the least self-forgiving, who bring the most of their interior life to the work of caring for others. Research consistently shows that self-critical individuals with less psychological flexibility are more disposed to compassion fatigue. The person who is exacting about the quality of their care, who cannot easily separate their professional performance from their sense of self-worth, who feels responsible not just for what they do, but for the outcome of what they do. That person is the one most at risk. And it is not confined to formal caregiving professions. The same mechanism operates in anyone whose daily existence requires sustained empathic engagement. The parent of a child with chronic illness, the friend who has become everyone's emotional anchor, the person who cannot hear about someone else's pain without feeling it as their own and feeling responsible for doing something about it. The self-other differentiation that protects empathic capacity, the ability to feel with someone while maintaining an emotionally separate sense of self, is the variable. When that boundary holds, empathic engagement produces meaning and connection. When it collapses under sufficient sustained pressure, what follows is empathic distress. And what follows empathic distress, chronically, is the depletion of the very capacity that made the caring possible in the first place. Final thoughts. Figley described compassion fatigue as the greatest threat to personal, professional, and financial success among those who truly provide compassionate care. The word greatest is doing significant work in that sentence, not a threat, the greatest threat. Because the people most likely to experience it are the people most essential to the functioning of every system that depends on human care. And because the very quality that makes them essential is what makes them vulnerable. The nurses in the qualitative study described something that happened after the worst of it had passed. Compassion fatigue, for some of them, became a crisis with potentially valuable insights. The person who comes through it and recognizes the early symptoms, who builds the capacity to respond to the alarm before the depletion becomes total, who learns the difference between empathic distress and empathic concern, that person does not become less caring. They become more sustainable in their caring. The gift does not have to be lost permanently, but it has to be recognized as a gift worth protecting. And that recognition almost never comes before the cost of not protecting it has already been paid.